Hello everyone, my name is Carl Bicknell. I've got some findings to share with you about Stockfish 17's tactical ability. I hope you enjoy this video.
The purpose of this video is to show some observations about Stockfish 17's tactical ability, especially with regard to its scaling with more threads. Before I begin, I would like to point out the following by way of introduction to avoid misunderstandings. Throughout this video, I am not making any connection whatsoever between tactical strength and ELO. These are two totally separate things. I realize the priority of the Stockfish team is playing strength, measured in ELO, not tactical strength, measured by solving tactical puzzles like a complicated mate in 12. This video, therefore, is not a criticism of Stockfish or the team that makes it. All I'm doing is showing you some data which I consider to be surprising, but you may not, and there may be a simple explanation for it. So far, however, I haven't heard a convincing explanation. Throughout all testing, threads never exceed the number of physical cores used, and therefore in this video I'm going to use threads and cores interchangeably. I realize in real life they're not the same thing, but I'm making a point that they will always match. If Stockfish is running on 32 threads, it will always have access to 32 physical cores. I'm staying well away from hyperthreading and all of the nonsense of having more threads and cores. That's a world of pain we could do without. The testing ground will be a private test suite of 162 positions compiled mainly from online sources like Arasan, but with many positions removed if a strict criteria was not met. I very carefully checked every single legal move of every single test position, and I used Aquarium to do that and then backsolved the analysis. I then double checked these positions carefully with more software. I've gone for positions which do not have cooks, that is, no alternative correct results or no alternative wins. I've stayed away from all positions which I do not consider to be tactical in nature, like, for example, a blocked position where it really depends upon the engine's understanding of the position, not its ability to search for a win. This is not of any interest to me at all. I'm looking for positions where there is a clear win found by search. And I've tried to remove positions where such a move could be found by chance, that is a sensible looking move. I've gone for moves which are typically quite costly to the engine, like, for example, a knight sacrifice, because moves like that would not be found by chance alone. This resulted in 162 sound test positions, and the engine always gets 60 seconds per position unless stated otherwise. Moving to the results, the first thing I did was to take Stockfish 17 running on one physical core of my 64 core Threadripper and allowing it 1 minute for each test position. It solved 112 out of 162 positions with an average solve time of 7.22 seconds. This is pretty good, by the way. And another thing to clarify, by the way, this video is not a criticism of Stockfish's tactical ability. It's more a confusion around its lack of scaling with more threads. Then what I did is, keeping the hardware fixed at one core, I doubled the time per position, all the way up to 16 minutes per position. In an ideal world, of course, I would love to keep doubling to 64 minutes per position, but as I'm sure you can appreciate, when there are 162 test positions to get through, that's a lot of time. And the results, by the way, are exactly what I was expecting. A nice, smooth improvement. This is excellent and very normal. Do not be dismayed at the apparent difficulty that Stockfish has at climbing up through the test positions, because the easy test positions are always solved first and the harder ones take longer to find the answer. And therefore, to get to 135 out of 162 on this particular test suite is very commendable indeed. Notice the clear progression. as time is longer. But then what I did was I fixed the time, so it was always 60 seconds per position, but now I changed the hardware and I went all the way up to 64 cores. That is 64 threads. And here, this is where I think things get really surprising. There is no real progression here. Maybe you could argue there is a bit going from one thread to two threads, but basically everything else is just noise. By the way, for the purists out there, I'm well aware that running on more than one thread produces a non-deterministic search. So I try to minimize that fluctuation by running multiple test runs and then averaging the results. I know it's probably not perfect, but it's the best I could do. And I think it's fairly clear that you don't get any serious progress. Interestingly, you don't get progress either in the number of positions solved or in the average solve time. It's more or less the same. This really confuses me because if you can imagine the game tree in chess, Stockfish running on one thread searches at a certain number of positions per second, somewhere around 1 million. And if you then move to 64 threads, it's obviously searching many more positions per second. And what that translates to is at 64 threads, we would be seeing more of the game tree in chess in those 60 seconds. And therefore, on average, we should have more search luck. More search luck typically translates to more positions solved, but in this case, it is not producing that result, and that is why I am confused. This begs the question, why? Why is this phenomena taking place? And this is where I'd love the Stockfish team to be able to answer this. I went on the Stockfish Discord and I also went online in other places, and various proposals were put forward. Someone said that tactical test positions, unlike a quiet, normal position, favor a search that converges rather than diverges, and therefore there isn't really much advantage to increasing the number of threads, since the lines are very, very forced, and those forcing lines can typically be handled on one thread. Someone else said, it's always been this way. Didn't you know that? Well, actually, no, I've been testing chess computers for more than 30 years, and it definitely has not always been this way, but I will explain that one later. Someone else said, blame lazy SMP. With Young Brothers search, it was different. Someone else said, blame Stockfish's NNUE. That is the evaluation function that Stockfish uses. That's the problem. Well, I believe all four of these explanations are incorrect, and I will try to refute each one now. The first thing I did was I went back to Ribka 4.1. This is an engine I know well. I tested the Ribka cluster a lot back in the day, and I tested it on 1 core, 2 cores, and 64 cores. And exactly as I was expecting, there was a clear progression in the number of test positions solved. Ribka, of course, is an old engine now, using the Young Brothers weight concept search, and so it's it's not going to be as good as Stockfish, obviously, from a tactical point of view, but you can see the progression. That's the point. As the hardware goes up, the number of test positions solved also goes up, and the solve time drops, which is what you'd expect. I then moved to Stockfish 11. If you're wondering why has he gone to Stockfish 11, the reason is because Stockfish 11 uses lazy SMP search, which is more advanced or more suitable for big hardware, but it does not yet use an NNUE evaluation function. So that's the reason why I went for this version of Stockfish. And again, I think you can see the same concept takes place. The more hardware you use, the better the results are. Stockfish 11 running on 64 cores searches and succeeds in finding more positions from the test suite than the others and also has a lower average solve time. Going back to the spreadsheet that I showed you earlier with Stockfish 17, where the hardware increases, what I then did was I went online and I found the Stockfish cluster and I rented it running on 720 physical cores. I also rented a bigger version running on 1440 cores, and its results were more impressive, but unfortunately the connection broke before I was able to complete my test, and therefore I haven't got the results. I'm sorry about that, but it looked to me like it was going to solve about 150 out of 162. With that would be double the hardware of the small 720 core version. But I think you can see the Stockfish cluster, which almost certainly has a different search technique to regular Stockfish because it's kind of split over multiple computers. Stockfish cluster has a superb result. It's running on massive hardware, but it's a superb result both in terms of the number of positions solved and the average time, which is very low. Now this immediately kills the idea that tactical test positions favor one thread, because here it's running on 720 and it's done way better than Stockfish on one thread. So that blows that explanation of the convergent search, or whatever it is, completely out of the water. In short, the first one has been refuted. It hasn't always been this way. Ribka 4.1 and Stockfish 11 and all of the old engines demonstrate that. You can't blame lazy SMP because actually Stockfish 11 uses lazy SMP and it didn't have any trouble as the hardware increased. Nor can you blame the NNUE evaluation function because Stockfish 17 cluster version uses that too, and it doesn't have any problems. And by the way, the NNUE would also fail given more time, but as we saw in the very first results panel, Stockfish 17 with more time actually does pretty well, so that doesn't hold either. In short, I think all four reasons fail. Now, I believe there is an explanation. I believe it's probably well known to the Stockfish team, but it's difficult for a layperson, even quite an enthusiastic layperson, to work it out. So I would love to hear back from those who know to explain this riddle to us all. Thank you so much for your time. I wait to hear from you.